Hi there, Allison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to Saumur, and we're looking at the Domaine Saint-Just L'Ardoisier Mousseux Rouge. Domaine Saint-Just is the family domain of Arnaud Lambert that was started by Arnaud's father, Yves, back in 1996. The parcels of Domaine Saint-Just have since been amalgamated with the parcels of Château de Brézé to form Domaine Arnaud Lambert as we know it today. This cuvée, L'Ardoisier, was one of the original cuvées of the domaine that Yves began making because it was a historical style of sparkling wine and Cabernet Franc very representative of the Saumur region. And Arnaud continues to make this wine today as a nod to his late father's legacy. Arnaud shared with me that he believes his father named the cuvée L'Ardoisier in reference to the dark color of Cabernet Franc and this Mousseux Rouge, evoking imagery of the dark slate tiles used on the roofs of homes and buildings throughout the region. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This wine must be an anomaly in the Loire Valley, a rare example of traditional method sparkling red Cabernet Franc. But in fact, this style of sparkling wine and Cabernet Franc has a long history in the region and is still produced extensively today. Based on my conversations with producers throughout the region, it is believed that this style of Cabernet Franc and sparkling wine was first produced in the mid-1800s and came about with the rise of the sparkling wine houses that were established across the region during this period. And the wine was always based with Cabernet Franc because of the grape's naturally high acidity and relatively low to moderate tannin profile. Now, the data on this wine today is relatively hard to come by because there is not an official appellation of origin for Saumur Mousseux Rouge. But based on my research, the wines are almost always based with Cabernet Franc as the principal variety, and occasionally with the small addition of either Gros Lot or Gamay. The wines are always made using the traditional method of sparkling wine production, that is, the secondary fermentation is taking place inside the bottle, just like in champagne, and the wines are generally made in a demi-sec style, that is, with a dosage of around 32 to 50 grams per liter residual sugar. Now, according to the Association of Producers of Saumur Fine Bulle, there is around 30 domaines, including all the sparkling wine houses that are regularly making a Mousseux Rouge in this style today. And there's currently an application that has been put forward to the INAO to expand the Saumur Mousseux appellation to include Mousseux Rouge. So looking at today's wine a little bit more closely, it's important to note off the top that Arnaud does not make this wine in every vintage. But when he does make this wine, he is generally sourcing from the same parcels. And the parcels are usually from Saint-Cyr-en-Bourg, from the bottom of the slope, usually with the lightest textured soils, so more sandier soils to give the lightest tannin profile in the finished wine. He's working these parcels exactly the same as how he works his parcels for red wines, and the parcels are formed organically. So when it comes down to the choice of vintage, the question here becomes yield, and a more generous yield is desired here because less concentration is required for a wine of this style. So in the case of this bottling, this is from one vintage, the 2018 vintage, and the yield for this vintage was around 60 hectoliters per hectare. Now, the fruit was all machine harvested, and the fermentation takes place in stainless steel with indigenous yeast. And the goal for the fermentation here is a very cool and fermentation with a relatively short maceration. So the objective is to extract the color and the flavor from the Cabernet Franc grapes, but not extract the tannins. So the fermentation temperature is around 22 degrees Celsius, and the total time on skins is just 5 days. Now, the base wine and this whole wine is only free-run wine, so there's no press wine used in this cuvée whatsoever. And the base wine, after the fermentation, is aged in stainless steel for about 8 months. And then following that, the wine is then bottled with the liqueur de tirage, and that's what gives us the secondary fermentation and eventually the bubbles. And then the wine is aged on lees for 3 to 4 years, which is pretty impressive. And then following the lees aging, the wine is disgorged, and then a dosage is added of around 36 grams per liter. So we're on the drier side of the demi-sec range. And the objective here with this dosage is not to add overt sweetness, rather it's to balance the acidity and the tannin and give a bit more breadth and length to the palate. And then for this particular vintage, the total production was around 6,000 bottles. So let's dive into this Mousseux Rouge of Cabernet Franc. So immediately the nose is absolutely exquisite. It's bright, it's fresh, it's got wonderful mix of fruit. I would say it definitely leans more fruit forward. And I would say it leans kind of in the red and dark fruit spectrum. So there's a bit of cherry here. There's a touch of raspberry, black raspberry. There's a little bit of the pâté de fruits that you can find, the little candy that you find in France. There's a touch of cassis here as well. And I would say, yeah, it definitely leans a little bit more fruit forward. The vintage 2018 was a warm vintage, so that is very representative of the vintage. But there's also this wonderful herbal profile. So I'm getting this lovely mix of mint. There's a touch of tarragon here as well. There's a little bit of a floral undertone. So there's a bit of violets here. There's some rose as well. Yeah, the nose is just exquisite. It's very fresh, very varietally Cab Franc, which I absolutely love. Yeah, it's super pretty, very elegant, very perfumed, just lovely. On the palate, those same wonderful, fresh, ripe fruit profiles are coming through. So that cherry, that cassis is coming through in a really beautiful way. And then you get into the layers. You have that mint coming through really nicely in a nice pronounced way. The rose is coming through in a really lovely, almost a bit of like a Turkish delight thing going on the palate, which is really lovely. There's a little bit of the autolytic profile that's coming through as well. You know, as I mentioned, this was on lees for 3 to 4 years. So there is a little bit of a biscuity, almost reminiscent of a digestive biscuit or something like that, but there is a little bit of a biscuity kind of note on the palate as well. There's also a delicious chocolatey note, but more like cocoa nibs or dark chocolate, but there is a little bit of a chocolatey kind of profile on the palate. The mousse is absolutely exquisite. It's creamy, it's delicate. It's just got such a lovely uniformity to the mousse as well. The acidity is bright, it's very refreshing, and there's so much balance in this wine. It's really, really remarkable. It's stunning. You would not think that this has 36 grams per liter residual sugar. It is extremely balanced, and the way the acidity and the structure of this wine is working together is really creating this beautiful, complete profile. And because there's so much natural acidity here, there is this Moorish quality. Like you immediately kind of want to dive back into this wine because it's just so friendly. So there's so much ease on the palate. It's just so delicious. I love this wine so much. It's elegant, it's restrained, it's Cabernet Franc, but it's bubbly, it's effervescent, it's delicious. And just that little bit of sweetness there kind of on the back end just gives that little bit of extra flesh, that little bit of extra roundness to the palate on this wine. It's absolutely delightful. I'm in love. I'm in love with this wine. I'm in love with this style of Cabernet Franc. I think it's absolutely exquisite. It's so unexpected. You know, this is one of the reasons why I love this grape so much. And really, When I first tasted this wine, this cuvée specifically, it was in spring of last year in Paris with my friend Tom. And then I tasted it again at the Domaine with Arnaud in June. And then I bought a bottle and I tasted it back before the holidays. And every single time I come back to this wine, it just brings me so much joy. I love this cuvée so much, and I love what this style means as far as, this project. When I launched this project, one of the pillars of Franc Chronicles was the versatility of this grape and my belief that this grape is capable of producing exceptional wines of excellence at every spectrum of the wine scene, from sparkling right through to great red wines to sweet wines like ice wine, for example. And this to me exemplifies what this grape is capable of and why I love this grape so much. And I wanted to revisit this wine just because I think it is exquisite. And I think it's also one of the very few Cabernet Francs that actually works well with desserts. Now, we have to remember that we want to keep the desserts less sweet than the wine, so we have to be very careful. So I think this wine would actually pair very well with just a lovely piece of high quality dark chocolate. But also if you did like a dark chocolate cake or even a classic dark chocolate tart or something like that, I think that would be absolutely exquisite. But because the sweetness on this is not as pronounced as we think, it actually works really well with savory applications like this, with a little foie gras with a bit of some sort of blueberry compote or something like that. I think would be absolutely outstanding. I think it would also work super well with like a duck breast or venison with the right kind of sauce, if there was like a fruit component to the sauce. But it's absolutely delicious. And this is a wine that I would love for people to seek out. It's not easy to find outside of the Loire Valley. In fact, this was recently released in Ontario, and I got so excited by that. I bought up a bunch of bottles for my own cellar, but this is definitely a wine to seek out because it is really an exquisite expression of Cabernet Franc. And there's some really amazing examples of this Mousseux Rouge that you can find in the Loire Valley. So if you find yourself in the Loire, please do yourself a favor and seek out this style of Mousseux Rouge. And if you can find the L'Ardoisier, this is definitely one I would definitely recommend because it is one of my favorites in this particular style. But if you've had the pleasure of tasting the L'Ardoisier, or perhaps you have another favorite Mousseux Rouge of Cabernet Franc from the Loire, I would love to know what that is. Hit me up in the comments below as always. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.